They told me it was just a drill, nothing more, nothing less. A routine training exercise at a remote facility no live fire, no real danger, just a test of precision in nerves. That's what they said. I believed them. Or maybe I wanted to believe them. I'd been deployed before. I'd seen chaos up close. This was supposed to be different. Controlled. Safe. The moment I stepped off the transport, though, I knew something was off. The facility wasn't just remote, it was isolated, too quiet, too clean. Usually, there is some chatter, a sense of familiarity among the squad, a nod, a half smile there. But not this time. I was the only one flown. No briefing, no team. Just a silent handler who handed me a rifle case and pointed toward the edge of the facility. Esse perimeter. Zone código. 3rd floor. Window facing west. Your spotter is already waiting. That was it. No eye contact. No explanation. Just a vague command and unspoken pressure to comply. I made my way to the tower. The corridors echoed with each of my footsteps, metal grating beneath my boots, and not a soul sight. It felt like walking through the husk of something abandoned, something left behind for a reason. Yet, the power was on. The lights were working. The cameras tracked my movement. That's when I started to feel the presence of something watching, recording, measuring. I reached the top floor, and the spotter was already there, just like they said. He was leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, headset on. I'd never seen him before. His uniform had no name, no insignia, nothing to identify him. He didn't say hello. He just nodded once and motioned to the setup by the window. The rifle was already mounted. I didn't like it. I like to assemble my own gear, check every part, feel the balance, trust it. But this was different. It was custom, pristine, and unfamiliar. A suppressed 308 high-end optics, bipod perfectly adjusted, almost too perfect. I took my place behind the weapon and adjusted the scope. My hands were steady, but my gut churned. I scanned the field in front of me, an open terrain with scattered buildings, half-fallen fences, rusted-out vehicles. A standard mock battlefield, but no moving targets, no pop-up silhouettes, nothing. I waited for the spotter to call out distances, targets, adjustments. That's how it usually works. But he said nothing, not a word for almost 5 full minutes. Then, just as I started to shift uncomfortably, his voice crackled through the headset. Calm, focused, cold, target acquired, hold position. I froze. My finger slid away from the trigger. This wasn't the protocol. We hadn't even calibrated hers. There was no warm-up shot. No instructions. I scanned the horizon again, trying to locate the target myself, but all I saw was a heat shimmer in the distance. Then he spoke again, this time slower. Do not fire until I say so. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like this wasn't an exercise at all. Like I was upon something much bigger, I'd only just realized I was on the board. I turned slightly to glance at him, but he had turned his back to me, staring at a monitor he hadn't seen before live feed, multiple angles. I counted at least 6 camera views. This wasn't a training session. It was a surveillance operation. I wasn't the sniper, I was the weapon. My pulse quickened. My breathing shallowed. I wanted to speak, to ask what was going on, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the chill in the air. Maybe it was the way the spotter's hand hovered over the coals, like he was waiting for a word that hadn't yet come. I looked back into the scope. There was still no visible target. But I knew deep down that something was about to appear. Something they didn't want me to question. They'd brought me it alone, handed me a loaded rifle, paired me with a silent, nameless spotter, all under the pretense of a routine drill. It wasn't the routine. It never was. The moment I locked my eye back into the scope, something shifted. The air around me felt heavier, like the room itself was bracing for what came next. My breath slowed as I adjusted the focus. The crosshairs tightened around a patch of nothing, a cracked slab of pavement, framed by rusted beams and overgrown weeds. no movement, no signs of life, just stillness. Then it happened. A flicker, just a flicker, something small, something fast darting from one crumbling building to another. I snapped the scope to follow it, tracking its blur across the far edge of the field. It disappeared behind a half-collapsed wall, but the way it moved, it wasn't like any mannequin or drone. Too smooth, too calculated, human. I pulled back from the scope. He turned slightly toward the spotter. Did you see that? He didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the monitors, one hand on the console, the other pressed against his headset. Listening. Till someone, not me. E gritei de my teeth então bateu the rifle. The glint of sunlight caught the leaves just enough to blur my view for a second. When the scene refocused, the field was no longer empty. There was a figure now, standing just behind the rusted-out truck, motionless, watching. It wasn't a target dummy. I knew that immediately. Target dummies don't breathe. They don't shift their weight. They don't raise their arms. A wave. Yes, he waved. Slowly. One hand, barely lifted. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a surrender. It was something else entirely. Recognition. Either when my chest tightened. There was something familiar about him. He didn't make out his face through the scope, not fully, but there was something in the way he stood, the angle of his shoulders, the way his fingers curled back though after the wave. I knew that posture. I knew that body language. I lowered the rifle. What the hell is this? I said, louder now. I turned to the spotter, expecting resistance or reprimand, but instead, silence. He was gone. The chair was empty. The headset dangled from the armrest. The monitors flickered, static now crawling over the fence like ants. He left without a sound, without warning. I stood slowly, scanning the room. No footprints. No creak in the door. Just absence. It was as if he'd been erased. And then, a new voice in my earpiece. Shooter, confirm visual. You are green to engage. It wasn't his voice. It wasn't anyone I recognized. Deep, calm, completely disconnected. Like someone was reading from a script 1,000 miles away. He didn't answer. My hand hovered over the headset control. Shooter, confirm. I stepped back to the rifle. The man behind the truck hadn't moved. He was still watching me, waiting. For what? I didn't know. But I knew, in that moment, that this wasn't a test of skill. It was a test of loyalty. Obedience. Shooter, respond. I looked at the figure one last time. Just before I shut the headset off, I whispered something back. Not today. Then I yanked the earpiece from my head. The silence was deafening. No calls, no spotter, no orders. Just me, a high-powered rifle, and a man standing in the kill zone who wasn't supposed to be there and who knew exactly who I was. Because I knew who he was too. It was Thomas. Not a ghost. Not a memory. Not a figment. Thomas. From my old unit. From the mission that went dark in Kosovo. The one no one ever talked about again. The one I was told never happened. But he was Eddie. Alive. Looking straight at me. The shadows were just the scope. They were crawling through everything I thought I understood. About this mission. About my orders. About who I could trust. For the first time in a very long time. I didn't know whose side I was on. I didn't move for a long time. Just crouched there by the window, staring out through the scope at a man I wasn't supposed to see again. Thomas. Alive. Standing in a ghost town under my crosshairs like some resurrected secret. My heart beat louder than the wind rattling through the broken windows around me. My mind was a mess of memory and disbelief. How was he Eddie? Why was he Eddie? And why had they chosen me to pull the trigger? Kosovo. The mission they erased. The operation they sealed behind 100 pages of black ink. That night had changed all of us, those who made it back. But not all of us had. Thomas had been listed as Kia. I'd seen the satellite footage myself. The explosion. The silence. The reports. Closed casket. No remains. We had mourned him. We had moved on, at least pretended to. But now he was Eddie, looking up at me as if he'd known he'd be the one behind the glass. My hands trembled. not from fear, from confusion, from the betrayal creeping into my veins like icy water. Was this the plan all along? Lure me into position, put Thomas ideop, watch what he did do, see if he did shoot a I once would be died to protect. A loyalty test masquerading as a trainee op. If each was, then the people running each knew me better than I wanted to admit he was. They had no problem using my past against me. I looked again through the scope. Thomas still had te moved. He was close enough now that I could make out more details. The scar above his eyebrow, the notch on his left ear from a shrapnel wound I remember patching myself. Even the same worn out watchbudgie on his wrist. There was no doubt. It was him. Then he did something that nearly broke me. He smiled. It wasn't too wide. Just a small, knowing lift of the corner of his mouth. Nike he could see me. Nike he knew exactly where I was, exactly what I was being asked to do. It was the kind of smile that said, "You he not crazy. It is real. E I need you to remember who you are." 1,000 images flashed in my head, me e Thomas crouched e foxholes, whispering stupid jokes to stay sane, him covering my six during a firefight in the hills, the night we Maja packed, if the system turned on us, we did burn each to the ground. I stepped away from the rifle, pacing now, adrenaline flooding my bloodstream. I needed answers, but there was no one left to ask. The spotter had vanished. The facility was dead silent. I checked the stairwell, nothing. No backup, no vehicles. Just static on every channel and a rifle aimed at someone you wasn't supposed to see again. That's when I saw the headlight blink on the wall camera. They were watching. Of course they were. This wasn't just a test. It was a recording. A live feed. You wasn't the sniper. I was the subject. Somewhere behind another wall, in another room, someone was judging my every move. Timing my hesitation, logging my reactions, calculating my usefulness. Was I still an asset? Or a liability? I walked back to the window. Thomas had stepped forward now, standing completely exposed ideop, hands slightly raised, not surrender, not fear, just exposure, vulnerability. He was making it easy for me, like he wanted them to see he trusted me. Or maybe he was gambling that I still trusted him. I didn't raise the rifle again. Instead, I reached under the stock, found the micro screw near the receiver, and slowly loosened it. Then I removed the firing pin and dropped each into my pocket. If they wanted a kill shot, they didn't need to get each themselves. I stood and stared into the camera directly. I said the words I knew they were dreading. I want answers. Or this whole op burns. The blinking headlight froze for a second. Then it turned off. Moments later, the loudspeaker in the ceiling crackled. "Shooter, remain in position. Do not leave the room." But I was already moving. I grabbed the rifle, useless now, and slung it over my back. I had no map, no plan, no backup, but I had one truth. Thomas was alive. Whoever was behind this operation had spent a lot of time, money, and effort to make me believe he wasn't there. That meant they were hiding more than just a soldier. They were hiding a story. I was about to expose it. I imagined it the whole way, rifle slung useless over my shoulder, still gripping the firing pin in my pocket like it was some kind of anchor to reality. The lights overhead flickered in that half-intentional way, not broken, but programmed to disorient. Every corridor looked the same, metal concrete, sterilized like a surgical room that forgot each once belonged to soldiers. The kind of place that didn't need a sign to remind you each was never meant to be found. I thought about the spotter again, his silence, his detachment, and then his disappearance. No trace, no sound, just gone. Something in me kept replaying the way he stood, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he didn't meet my eyes. He wasn't just another operator. He was a ghost planted for a purpose, someone trained to vanish at the right moment. Someone whose job ended the second I started asking questions. As I made my way toward the elevator at the far end of the hall, I passed the room he'd been monitoring from. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the monitors were off now. completely black, but the room still smelled like gun oil e stress fresh, recent, lived. I searched the desk, the shelves, anything. No notes, no files, just one item, neatly placed on the console. I had sat. Not the standard concept. This one was modified, military grade, encrypted. It was still warm. I picked it up, slipped it over my ears, e paused. Silence. Then, faintly a burst of static. Then a voice. I whisper. If she is hearing this, the protocol is already failed. I froze. Repeat. If this transmission is intercepted, initiate blackout procedure. Subject is no longer compliant. Subject. They weren't even calling me by name anymore. I reached for the monitor control panel and pressed the reboot sequence. One screen flickered on, then another. Naive feeds from surveillance points all over the facility. Hallways, exits, trainee zones, offices. But only one camera caught my eye, the one pointing into the observation tower where I had just been. He standing there was the spotter. My pulse jumped, but something was wrong. He wasn't moving. He was standing there still, looking out the window through the scope, like he was stuck in some kind of loop. The camera feed stuttered, flicked, glitched, and I realized it wasn't live. It was recorded, a loop. He'd never been real. Or if he had, it was only for a moment. He was placed there for me. A projection, an actoria Holly whose only job was to direct my focus where they wanted it out there, onto Thomas, while they studied me from the shadows. And I had followed it exactly as planned. Until we didn't. I grabbed the headset and spoke directly into the mic. Tell me what this is. E me done playing along. No response. Just static. Then, faint breathing. Not mine. Someone else on the line. Then a voice hadn't heard since Kosovo. You weren't supposed to see him. My spine went cold. Who is this? I demanded. You know who this is. You saw me die. Or you think you did. Echo didn't speak. The voice was Thomas S. But not the Murray they just seen in the field. No. This voice was older, sharper, twisted with something artificial, something modulated. You he part of a project now, he said, one you helped build, without ever knowing. I clenched the mic. What the hell are you talking about? The voice paused. Then, coldly, you were never the sniper. You were always the target. I dropped the headset like it burned. Everything in my gut twisted. This wasn't a betrayal, it was a design. It wasn't a hog element a system. I was the system. Groomed, trained, programmed. And now, whatever they built me for, was activating. The spotter hadn't disappeared. He never existed at all. He didn't go back for the headset. I left it where it lay, on the cold floor of that surveillance room, hissing its static into the dark like a dying animal. I didn't need to hear any more lies. I needed to find the truth if that meant tearing this whole place apart piece by piece, so be it. I moved through the hallways with a kind of precision I hadn't felt since my first real mission. No more second guessing, no more looking for orders. Whatever this facility was, whoever had built it, I was done being their puppet. The rifle slung across my back disabled, empty had become more symbolic than functional. I didn't need it anymore. What I needed was behind the locked doors, behind the sealed archives, buried in the guts of the operation they never expected me to question. I found the stairwell window, past the armory level, past the simulation zones, into the sub-levels. There were no maps, no signs, just a silence that told me I was leaving the parts they wanted me to see, entering the places meant to stay hidden. At the bottom of the stairwell, I found a steel door with no handle, just a biometric pad. I stared at it. Then I did something they probably didn't account for. I took the barrel of the useless rifle and smashed the panel. Sparks burst. Then nothing. I waited. 30 seconds later, a hiss of compressed air sounded, and the door unlocked. Owned habits like Batco Jihad. They had built their systems to respond to aggression, to threat. They'd trained me well, and now I was using the trainee to break their own rules. The room beyond wasn't a control room. It was a vault, lined out with servers, cooling furs mede like a hive. Ainda sentirá terminal. A single screen, active. I approached it slowly, uncertain whether this was a trap or a teste. But when the screen flickered to life without prompting, I knew they were expecting me, or someone like me. A prompt appeared, enter intradérmica for classified retrieval. I typed in my old operator intradérmica, the one they told me had been decommissioned after the Kosovo mission. The screen blinked. Then, access granted. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt sick. Fetus opened the cascading windows. Names, missions, video logs, surveillance summaries, psychological evaluations. Then a folder marked simply, Project Echo. I clicked. It wasn't just about me. It was about all of US. Every operator who'd gone missing in action. Every soldier listed as irrecoverable. Every name scratched off with an excuse e a folded flag. They had died. They'd been repurposed. Cloned. No. It wasn't science fiction. It was something worse. Psychological mapping. Neural duplication. Combat trainee patterns stored, replicated, e reinstalled. A generation of synthetic agents built not from scratch, but from ghosts. Soldiers who deserved Tor well, obeyed Tor blindly, could be used again. I was one of them. But not the way I thought. Because as I dug deeper, I found footage of me, sitting in a medical chair. Wires in my scalp, eyes blank. Uvavi. A date stamped across the footage, 3 years ago. But I had no memory of that. They'd taken me, reprogrammed me, wiped pieces of who I was reinstalled what they needed. Not every part, just the inconvenient ones, the doubt, the questions, the loyalties that didn't fit the mission. They called it ethical pruning. I called it razuri. Thomas S. Filho was there too, and not just one. Versions, attempts, trial rules, failed seeks. The man I saw in the film wasn't the original Thomas. He was one of the constructs, a synthetic echo. A replica meant to draw me in. Meant to provoke either recognition or a kill reaction. Either way, they'd win. I would either prove I was too obedient, or prove I needed further refinement. But he hadn't done either. They walked off script. And now, there was no script left. That's when I heard the door behind me hiss up again. Not kicked, not broken, opened. A figure stepped in, calm, clean, wearing my old unit S insignia, clipboard in one hand, tranquilizer gun in the other. He smiled. You came further than the others. Didn't move. You not the first to wake up, but you might be the last. I stared him though. My hand slid into my pocket, fingers wrapping around the firing pin. They'd erased who I was, but they didn't realize something critical. I kept the one piece that made me dangerous. My memory. It didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stood there, facing the mirror with my past sewn into the patch on his shoulder. The tranquilizer pistol in his hand was steady, his expression casual, almost bored. Like this was just another test, another specimen caught outside the parameters, another error to be corrected. But I was no longer their error. I was their reckoning. He took a step forward, keeping his voice even. You disoriented. That's normal. The echoes always think they've uncovered something. But memory is a trick of the software. You running on what is left of a damaged file, nothing more. We reset you, reformat. You won't even remember this conversation. He lifted the pistol slightly, a practiced motion, ready to fire. I smiled. In one smooth motion, I reached behind my back and slid the rifle off my shoulder. Still carrying that hardware? He said with a half smirk. What do you think you going to do with it? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. With my left hand, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the firing pin. The one piece they saved. The one piece they forgot they taught me to protect above all else. I installed it in the rifle in 3 seconds. They'd trained me well. His eyes narrowed. His finger twitched on the trigger. I moved first. The shot wasn't for him. I turned, aimed at the terminal behind me, and fired. The bullet tore through the screen, shattering each instantly, sparking a violent cascade across the servers lining the vault. Smoke poured from the processors. Data screamed in bursts of dying code. I heard alarms begin to wail, the emergency lights kicking bathing the roomy bloodhead. He lunged, but tore latch. I turned and slammed the rifle into his throat with the butcher stock, knocking the pistol from his hand. He crumbled, coughing, eyes wide. There was no fight left, just disbelief. You were never supposed to think, he gasped. You were supposed to follow. I crouched next to him. You made me a weapon, but you forgot something. He blinked slowly, pain making his voice hoarse. What? I leaned closer. I was human first. Then I stood left him there, gasping the dark, beneath the flickering night of a dying experiment. The corridors outside were chaos. Systems shutting though, doors unlocking at random. Whatever they had stored, whoever they had caged, each was all coming undone. I passed rooms filled with equipment, rows of beds, chairs with restraints, names scrawled on clipboards beside hollow-eyed soldiers staring at walls. Some looked up when I passed. One of them whispered, "She magiete. E didn't stop. E didn't. I had one goal now. Get out." He made sure none of this could be hidden again. As I reached the surface, the early light of morning broke over the facility's outer ridge. The air smelled like ozone e smoke. A transport helicopter sat on the pad, rotors stew. E didn't ask who left it for me, whether it was another failed clone or someone inside who had grown a conscience. It didn't matter. I boarded. Inside, I found a satchel. Inside it, a hard drive, unmarked, unlabeled, but familiar. I plugged it into the onboard console and skimmed the files. It was everything: video footage, experiment logs, names, operators, even blueprints of Project Echo's true mission. They had wanted to create perfect soldiers, loyalty without question, obedience without end. But in doing so, they broke the one rule no war machine should forget: memory is power. And when memory returns, it turns weapons into witnesses. As I lifted off, the facility behind me started to collapse. Fiery the eastern wing. Chain detonations from the server banks. No alarms now. Just silence and smoke, a graveyard for ghosts mad of stolen minds. I didn't look back. Where I was going, you didn't need a rifle. I had something far more dangerous. The truth. One shot. One decision. That's all it took. And they never forget it. Because they make sure the whole world remembers. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because next time, the truth might hit you even closer to home. We uncover hidden stories the world was never supposed to hear. If you here's to watching, you hear one of us now.